Phil Coulson is dying, and I'm going to tell you why that needs to happen so that he can be reborn in Infinity War. Coming right up. Hi, I'm Darren Jakes, D for short, and thank you for joining me on this little insight on what we might be seeing in the upcoming Avengers Infinity War. Originally appearing in 2008's Iron Man, Clark Gregg's Agent Phil Coulson quickly became a staple of the early MCU, appearing in nearly every Phase 1 film until his death at the hands of Loki in 2012's The Avengers. But Coulson's witty, unflappable everyman connected strongly with fans, so much so that, driven by the hashtag #CoulsonLives, he was resurrected to helm the MCU's first foray into network television, Marvel's Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. Now in its 5th season, having faced Hydra, Inhumans, killer robots, ghosts from the dark dimension, and invading aliens from space, Phil Coulson is again at death's door. But with the end of Phase 3 culminating 10 years and 19 movies, the way Coulson is dying may actually set the stage for his return to the MCU proper. Now in The Avengers, Coulson was killed when Loki drove his staff through Coulson's heart during their confrontation aboard the helicarrier. Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. explained Coulson's return via Project Tahiti, a secret experimental S.H.I.E.L.D. program that used the mysterious properties of recovered alien Kree blood and other fluids to heal the damage to Coulson's heart and return him to the living. Now, this was not without serious side effects, of course, but that only served to help propel major story points through the show's first 2 seasons. However, at the end of last season, Coulson temporarily bonded with the spirit of vengeance himself, Ghost Rider, in order to stop the rogue LMD Ada. While successful in that regard, the bond apparently burned out the restorative power of the Kree infusion. Thus, Coulson is slowly dying again, succumbing to the same death that Loki inflicted on him so many years before. And this is important because despite 5 seasons of Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D., according to the film universe, Phil Coulson is dead. No one is supposed to know that he's actually alive. I mean, outside of Nick Fury and possibly Maria Hill. And that has, over the years, begun to strain credibility. I mean, in the current season, he's one of the most wanted men in the world. And yet we're supposed to believe that someone like Tony Stark, who discovered Spider-Man's identity from a series of YouTube videos, still hasn't realized that Coulson is alive and well. But if Coulson dies before Infinity War from effectively the same wound that killed him in the Avengers, then they wouldn't need to acknowledge all of those seasons of Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. because any resurrection or rebirth would effectively find him in the same position the film universe last saw him in. Look, Marvel isn't stupid. They understand that with 19 movies and 8 television series spread out over 3 television networks and streaming services, if you want to look at the MCU in its entirety, that only die-hard fans have probably seen them all. But everybody sees the big team-up films. Avengers and Age of Ultron are the 2 highest grossing films in the MCU. So even if you've only seen a couple of Marvel movies, chances are it's one or both of the Avengers films. So even if you've never seen an episode of Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D., not only do you know who Phil Coulson is, but you know how he died and what his death meant to one Tony Stark. While the Marvel Cinematic Universe is comprised of an ever-growing number of heroes, if it has any one central character, that is, without a doubt, Robert Downey Jr.'s Tony Stark. Iron Man launched the MCU, gave it its first financial successes, is easily its most recognizable face, and has effectively allowed Marvel to become the powerhouse that it is. Yet despite all of the changes and evolution of the character over the years, the primary motivator for all of Tony's decisions has always been death or the fear of death. In Iron Man, it was Ho Yinson's death that galvanized his initial transformation into Iron Man and began his hero's journey. In Iron Man 2, it was the fear of his own death that motivated him to give the Mark II armor to Rhodey, as well as eventually develop the new power core for himself. Iron Man 3 had the near death of Happy Hogan. In Age of Ultron, it was the fear of the team's death, and Civil War gave us a twofer. The story of Charles Spencer's death during the Battle of Sokovia pushed him to support the Sokovia Accords, and lingering anger over his own parents' death caused him to turn against Bucky Barnes and, of course, his friend and fellow Avenger, Captain America. But it was Coulson's death that served as the linchpin in the formation of the Avengers team, and taught Tony that sometimes sacrifice is needed for the greater good. This gives Coulson an enduring legacy in both the Avengers franchise and with Stark himself. Now, while death has always been the fuel for Tony's actions, redemption for his failures has always been his goal, and Infinity War will no doubt continue that theme. Whether it be his arms-dealing past, his egocentric worldview, the creation of Ultron, or the deaths resulting from it, Tony has constantly struggled to undo the consequences of his own actions. And now, with the Infinity Gauntlet in play and the literal ability to remake reality, the temptation to fix all of his past mistakes will undoubtedly play a critical role in Tony's fight against the Mad Titan. And finally, in Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D's recent 100th episode, The Real Deal, Coulson encounters a fear dimension, which manifests a world where his past 5 years have all been a dream, created in his mind as he lays on the operating table, dying from Loki's wound. And in the background, one of the doctors seems to imply to do whatever it takes to keep him alive, with the line, "Mr. Stark said whatever he needs." But Coulson is a S.H.I.E.L.D. agent, wounded on the helicarrier. If the doctors are listening to anyone's orders, it's going to be Fury's. Director Fury said whatever he needs. So this specific call out to Stark seems to reinstate the impact of Coulson's death on Tony. So, here's my theory. At some point, Tony is going to be tempted by the power of the Infinity Stones. Now, this could be Thanos attempting to manipulate Tony by promising to bring back people he lost or to undo some mistake in exchange for one of the stones. Or possibly Tony himself might get a hold of the Infinity Gauntlet and be tempted to use it to undo everything that's happened since Loki first arrived to claim the Tesseract. And that means no Mandarin, no Ultron, no Sokovia, no Civil War. Tell me, for Tony, that wouldn't be tempting. Either way, Tony will be tempted. And as either an offering or a proof of concept, Coulson will be returned from the dead, the damage to his heart undone. Now, I know what you're thinking. Why Coulson? Why not Yinsen or Quicksilver or his parents or any of the other heroes that have probably already died in the Infinity War itself? Well, first off, Yinsen wanted to die. He wanted to join his family, who had already been killed by the Ten Rings. Are you going to take him away from them? You're going to try and bring back the whole family? It's a little complicated there. As for Tony's parents, they were killed a long time ago, when Tony was still in college. And despite his lingering anger over their loss, bringing them back now, decades after their death, would also be a bit problematic. Coulson died in an Avengers film after numerous appearances throughout Phase 1. Audiences are simply more likely to know his story than they are Yinsen's or Spencer's or even Tony's parents. I mean, there is Quicksilver, but he really had more of a connection to Hawkeye than to Tony. And lastly, this scene would probably happen in Act 2, maybe early Act 3, before any major losses on the hero's side. Besides, let's be honest, no one of any importance is going to die before Avengers 4. Now, this would accomplish several things. First off, it brings the Avengers full circle, with a great emotional callback to the formation of the team. Secondly, it returns Coulson to the MCU. One of the greatest gripes that Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. fans have had over the years is that despite the Marvel motto of everything is connected, there has been scant crossovers or connections with the movies. This would allow the film universe to finally acknowledge the TV universe. And lastly, if Samuel L. Jackson, and thus Nick Fury, retires from the MCU, Coulson would be in the perfect position to take over as director of S.H.I.E.L.D. Now, I know some of the TV fans have been hoping that Daisy Johnson, Quake, would take over that role, but that's highly unlikely. I mean, first off, she was branded a terrorist. Before being revealed to being an undercover agent by Director Mace, but she was also then framed for his murder, as well as framed for shooting General Talbot in the head. Under the shadow of those accusations, being promoted to director, highly unlikely. But the real truth is, Daisy Johnson is unknown to the film universe, whereas Coulson is. Now, I know that Clark Gregg was just announced in the cast of Captain Marvel, so technically Coulson is returning to the MCU. But that's 20 years ago. That takes place in the 90s. That doesn't deal with today's world. Besides, to be honest, if Coulson is brought back in Infinity War, it makes the audience much more aware of him when he returns next year in Captain Marvel. So, those are my thoughts, and hopefully we are going to catch Clark Gregg in the upcoming Infinity War. But what do you guys think? Likely theory? Am I shooting for the moon? Is this a fanboy's dream? Why don't you throw your thoughts down in the section below? And as usual, I would appreciate if you hit that like button, subscribe. Heck, you can check out a couple other videos of mine, and I hope you like them. Anyway, that's it for me. Thank you so much for joining me on this discussion. I'm D, and I'm out of here. I'll catch you guys next time. Bye-bye.